Hi, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time it is. As always, happy whatever day it is. Welcome to episode 152, I believe it is, of Left Side of the Aisle. I'm your host, and my name's Larry Erickson, and for the next half hour, I'm going to be your ranter and raconteur. I'm going to be talking about things important to me that I think you deserve to know about and should be concerned about yourselves. If at any point you have any questions, comments, reactions, whatever, you can email me. The address is whoviating, WHOVIATING, at AOL.com. Or you can go to my website, which is Lotus Surviving a Dark Time, and you can get the email address from there, or you can leave a comment there. If you do email me, I simply request that you, two things. One, that you include something in the subject line so I clearly know it's not spam, and be a little patient about getting an answer, because I'm not terribly quick about dealing with email, but you will get an answer. All right, those are the traditional introductions. They're out of the way. Let's get to the good stuff. And speaking of good, I'm going to start. I try to do this every week if I can. I'm going to start with some good news. This week, the good news comes out of Michigan. Last Friday, March 21st, U.S. District Judge Bernard Friedman struck down the state of Michigan's state constitutional ban on same-sex marriage. This is actually something several other federal judges have also done recently, because he found, as they did, that such a ban violates the U.S. Constitution's requirement for equal protection under the law. Friedman actually refused to stay the effect of his decision, which would allow some same-sex couples to get married as soon as last Saturday. And in fact, clerks in at least 4 Michigan counties issued more than 300 marriage licenses and presided over more than 100 weddings before an appeals court stepped in and issued a stay to prevent, a temporary stay, to prevent more such weddings. A hearing on that temporary stay was held on Wednesday, March 26th, and the appeals court issued a stay that blocks implementation of Judge Friedman's order allowing for same-sex couples to marry while the state appeals the decision. Now, this actually is very common. And remember, this is not about the decision. This is about staying its effect pending appeal. And doing so is actually very common, so really nobody is surprised the court did it. The interesting thing, though, about this is that it was a split decision on issuing the stay pending appeal. It was a 2-1 decision. The majority said that they relied to a significant extent on the fact that the Supreme Court, in another one of these cases, I think it was the one out of Utah, but I'm not sure, the Supreme Court issued a stay. And so said, well, in that case, we should issue a stay too. The dissenting judge said something very interesting. She said that the Supreme Court, when they issued the stay, had done it without comment, which means there's no actual guidance from the Supreme Court on the matter. So she applied the standard 4-point test for whether or not you should issue this stay. And she said based on that, she would not have stayed the opinion, stayed the judgment. And the thing is, interestingly, one of these 4 points is likelihood to succeed on appeal. So what she was saying was that, based on her understanding of the record to date, the state of Michigan is unlikely to succeed on its appeal of Judge Friedman's order. So that's good, too. Speaking of that decision, though, it was a keeper. It was. I actually talked about this case about 3 weeks ago. It's an important case here because those people who persist in trying to defend the indefensible tried a new tack here. The state of Michigan, under the administration of Governor Rick Snidely Whiplash, apparently realized that the arguments that other states used, which boiled down to we've always done it this way and gay marriage is icky and we don't like it, weren't going to fly. So they came up with a new one. It's all about the children, and arguing that kids thrive best when they're raised in a household of a married mommy to a married daddy, so same-sex marriages can and should be banned. Now, leaving aside the fact that this is a very obvious non sequitur, I said in discussing the case, I'm going to quote myself here, one obvious and should be fatal flaw in the state's argument is that the presence or lack of children or the intent to be parents has never been related to recognition of a right to get married. Judge Friedman made the same point in his ruling, saying that the state's arguments are belied, he said, by its own requirements, which, he said, I'm quoting him now, do not include the ability to have children, a requirement to raise them in any particular family structure, or the prospect of achieving certain outcomes for children. I also noted that, again quoting myself, that Michigan State was not helped by the fact that one of their two key witnesses was sociologist Mark Regnerus, whose claim to have shown that children are better off with opposite-sex parents than with same-sex parents has been dismissed by the American Sociological Association as fundamentally flawed. Friedman, in his ruling, was even harsher. He called Regnerus's testimony unbelievable and not worthy of serious consideration. He also said his study was, quoting, hastily concocted at the behest of a third-party funder who clearly wanted a certain result, and Regnerus obliged. Friedman labeled Regnerus's contention that the source of the funding did not affect his work as a researcher unbelievable. Which means ultimately that this decision was double good news. It wasn't only a blow for marriage justice, for the rights of same-sex couples. It was also a blow in favor of same-sex parents. Friedman declared that, quoting him, the evidence adduced at trial disproves the premise that children in same-sex households fare any worse than children in opposite-sex households. In his conclusion, Friedman wrote, and I'm quoting him again, in attempt to define this case as a challenge to the will of the people, state defendants lost sight of what this case is truly about: people. Today's decision affirms the enduring principle that regardless of whoever finds favor in the eyes of the most recent majority, the guarantee of equal protection must prevail. To which I say, right on, my brother. Now, there's actually a footnote to this, an example of something that we here call the little thing. This is where something in a story, some detail that's mostly overlooked, mostly not commented on, is actually in some way significant or revealing. Now, for me, the little thing is usually something that annoys me or frustrates me, but this time it's different. There was, and you probably heard about this, a horrendous story that came out of California the end of last week. Police in Salinas found 3 starving children, ages 3, 5, and 8, in a squalid home. All 3 exhibited bruises and other signs of physical and emotional abuse. The oldest of them, a girl, was chained to the floor, and police described her as looking like a concentration camp victim. The couple living in the home were both arrested on charges of felony child cruelty, false imprisonment, and other charges. It's a story that leaves you both horrified at the treatment and grateful that the children were saved. Here's the little thing. The Associated Press filed a 14-graph story on this, in which it was not until the 11th of 14 graphs that it was mentioned that the couple involved was 2 women in a domestic partnership. You know that not that many years ago, that fact would have been in the lead. You can consider this actually a sign of progress. All right, moving on from there, we have an RIP this week, and I'm really just discussing this because I know I'll be expected to. The notorious and gross bigot Fred Phelps, founder of the notoriously and grossly bigoted Westboro Baptist Church, which isn't part of any Baptist convention and isn't really a church, but more like a family cult, he has died at the age of 84. There has been a lot of reaction, both harsh, although frankly not as harsh as his Not a Church was about those people, its members hated so deeply that it's really hard for me to imagine living that way, to live in that kind of constant anger and rage and fear. But any event, there's been a lot of comment, both harsh and forgiving. One example of the forgiveness was when after Phelps' death, the Not a Church picketed a concert by New Zealand singer Lord, and some folks counter-protested with a sign that read simply, "Sorry for your loss." Now, I never have, and I will not now, celebrate the death of a human being, not even one as deeply loathsome as Fred Phelps. But I have to admit, I can't muster the sort of compassion and forgiveness, that those people showed, of compassion and forgiveness for those who remain devoted to his despicable legacy, especially when their own sense of compassion seems to be so absent. You see, in response to that sign I just showed you, sorry for your loss, one of the not-at-church picketers said, quoting, "I have no idea what they're talking about." Apparently his death was not a loss to them. Perhaps that's because he was excommunicated from the church last August after he called for kinder treatment of fellow church members in the wake of a power struggle. Apparently he was already dead to them and had been for some time. So frankly, here I leave it to others to say forgive and forget, because I can't forgive, at least not yet. On the other hand, I can say that I find Fred Phelps eminently forgettable. All right, now it's time for one of our regular weekly features. It's the Clown Award, given as always for some act of meritorious stupidity. I thought I had my clown, but a last-minute shift has put a different contender, in fact, a pair of different contenders, into the top spot. So this week, the big red nose goes to the winning pair of Massachusetts State Senator Richard Ross and former Rentham Selectman Robert Leclair. Now, I was going to give the word to South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, or Queen Nikki as an online friend calls her. She recently told an automotive conference that manufacturers with unionized workforces should stay the heck out of South Carolina. And yes, she did say exactly that. She said, this is quoting her, "It's not something that we want to happen. We discourage any companies that have unions from wanting to come to South Carolina because we don't want to," and I'm still quoting her, "taint the water." Now, what sort of clownishness could top that? Ross and Leclair succeeded. Ross introduced a bill that would prevent divorcing parents from having sex in their own homes. It says, and I'm quoting it entirely, "In divorce, separation, or 209A proceedings involving children and a marital home, the party remaining in the home shall not conduct a dating or sexual relationship within the home until a divorce is final and all financial and custody issues are resolved, unless the express permission is granted by the courts." Now, Ross has rather gruffly and grandly defended himself, noting the bill was filed, as it says, by request, from a petition filed by Leclair. Now, under Massachusetts' sometimes arcane legislative procedures, any citizen can petition their representative to file a bill. If the legislator does that, they don't necessarily agree with the bill, which they indicate by noting the bill was introduced by request. Ross says he doesn't agree with this one and accuses those who laughed at his actions of failing to understand the democratic process. Well, you know what? I don't buy it. Especially because A, Ross is from Rentham, Massachusetts, as is Leclair, and they're both former Rentham selectmen. Now, I'm not sure if they were selectmen at the same time, but it does mean they ran in the same political circles in the same town. And B, this is not the first time that Ross has introduced this bill on Leclair's behalf, having done so at least once before, back in 2011. So no, Senator Ross, I do not accept that this is all about respecting the democratic process, instead of being about clownishly wasting the time of the legislature and the legislative clerk by introducing a patently stupid bill that even you say is going nowhere and is not only inane, but lacks both enforcement provisions and penalties in order to show some love to a political crony. As for Leclair, this former head of a father's rights group who went through his own bitter divorce, he actually claims that this bill is not inane, that it's actually a serious attempt to deal with domestic abuse. And he's really ticked off that no one is taking his bill seriously. Well, actually, Mr. Leclair, we're taking it exactly as seriously as it deserves. Senator Richard Ross and former Rentham Selectman Robert Leclair. The reasons are somewhat different, but the two of you are both clowns. And just before we go to break, a quick update. Last week, I spoke about low-wage workers opening a new front in their fight for a living wage, that of filing lawsuits against McDonald's and a number of its franchisees, accusing them of wage theft, where an employer doesn't pay money they've earned or doesn't give them benefits to which they're entitled. Well, this week I can report there's actually been some progress on that front. It's not directly related to those suits, but it is related to the issue. 7 McDonald's franchisees in New York City, all owned by a single person, will pay nearly $500,000 to employees who were victims of wage theft. Some 1,600 employees will receive, present or former employees, I should say, will receive some benefit from this. The settlement was reached by the work of State Attorney General Eric Schneiderman. This comes 6 weeks after the Legal Aid Society won a 3-year battle against a Domino's franchisee, also in New York City, resulting in a nearly $1.3 million settlement for the workers involved. And at the same time, New York City Public Advocate Letitia James has announced proposals to crack down on wage theft in the fast food industry in the city. Now, admittedly, this is all happening in New York City. That's true. But even so, these events are helping to bring to light the fact that wage theft has become almost a normal feature of the lives of too many low-wage workers in too many industries, not just the fast food industry. This is a small start, but it is a start. And we're going to break. Hi, and we're back. Not that we really went anywhere. All right, now we're back with our other regular weekly feature. It's the Outrage of the Week. The DC Abortion Fund is a nonprofit in Washington, D.C. It's a group that helps low-income women afford abortion care because, as they say on their website, we believe that a woman's right to health care should not depend on her wallet. For the past 4 years, the group has been giving out coat hanger pendants to its donors. Why? Because the wire coat hanger has been a symbol of the reproductive rights movement for decades. Before 1973, before Roe v. Wade, before abortions could be legally obtained, desperate women would go to desperate lengths, desperate measures to put an end to an unwanted pregnancy. Women were known to consume Lysol or other household poisons in the hopes it would cause them to abort. They would stick knitting needles, Coke bottles, and yes, wire coat hangers into their cervixes in order to try to end a pregnancy. The accounts of women who were disabled or sterilized or bled to death as the result of a botched illegal abortion were legion. I've said on more than one occasion in discussing abortion rights that I remember the symbolism of a wire coat hanger, and I have no desire to return to that time. So for 4 years, the DC Abortion Fund has been giving out coat hangers and pendants, coat hanger pendants rather, to donors. And just recently, the right wing noticed. And on cue, Pavlov's dogs went berserk. The pendant was called sick, evil, disgusting, horrific, despicable, grotesque, repulsive, ghastly, while the folks who wear them are monsters who love to wear death on their necks. It's hard for me to understand, it's hard for me to grasp the utter, stultifying, abysmal ignorance of these people. Because it's clear in reading the comments, the reactions, the blather and the braying, it's clear that these people have no idea, not a clue, have not the vaguest notion of what it is they are talking about. They flip from screeching to scowling and back again. They pound and pontificate, they mule and moan, they deride and denounce, and through it all, it's clear that they have no idea what the symbolism of a wire coat hanger means. They have no idea what this represents. They have no idea what they're talking about, and they have no interest in finding out. They don't want to know, they don't want to be told, they refuse to be told. The few brave souls who ventured into the comment sections of places like National Review Online, who tried to point out that the coat hanger is a symbol of a time to which we do not want to return, they were either ignored, attacked with irrelevancies, or called liars by people who insisted that women did not die from abortions before Roe v. Wade. The appalling ignorance, the repellent, boneheaded insularity. My vocabulary does not extend to finding the right words for this. Because the thing is, it's not stupidity. It's not that these people are incapable of knowing. It's not that they can't know. It's that they refuse to know. They actively refuse to understand. And part of the reason they refuse to know is that they are so convinced that they already do know, that they already know everything that's relevant, everything there is to know about this. It's like a version of something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. This is an actual effect, actual measured psychological effect, where people who are really incompetent at something have more confidence in their abilities than the people who are competent at it. The reason is the competent people are aware of the limitations of their own abilities or knowledge, and the incompetent people aren't. So the result is that the really incompetent people just think that they know a lot more than they do. They think they understand a lot more than they do. And so here we have the multitudes of mouth breathers who biliously bloviate about the sanctity of life when what they would really do is condemn women to the mercies of back alley butchers. And doing it because they are so convinced beyond convincing that the clock of history started in 1973 and abortions didn't even happen before then. Happily, the DC Abortion Fund is not backing down. Val Villett, the executive director of the group, noted that the coat hanger pendants predate most of the people on her board. She said then that, quoting her, "We're going to provide funding regardless of what the conservative media has to say about the pendants. The coat hangers aren't going anywhere, and we're not going anywhere." So I say congratulations to her and to the group. But the fact remains that the people who are in their insistent ignorance, their determined denial, their absolute avoidance of the basic facts of the history of the issue, people who call dependence sick and evil and disgusting. It's the idea that we are supposed to regard these as the reasonable sentiments of reasonable people, and that they are making reasonable arguments that we are supposed to reasonably reason with. That's the outrage of the week. All right, we're going to finish up that after that. I got to go to something lighter. So we're going to finish up with an episode of And Another Thing. This is where we talk about something that's not political. Usually, most of the time, it's some cool science stuff. And this is so cool. I was going to do this last week, but I didn't have enough time. But I said I'm going to do it this week, even though the news is a couple of weeks old now, because it is just too cool to let pass. You've undoubtedly heard about this big breakthrough about seeing the beginning of time. You may have been unclear as to what it means. Because the thing is, a lot of the stuff that I read on it, it was either written by people who, are scientists who really understand this, with the result that I'm reading this and it said, this is so far over the heads of most people that they're not going to understand it. They're not going to get anything out of it. Or it was written by people who, I always like to say, you probably had the experience of reading something by somebody where they know the words, but you really can sense that they don't really have a real understanding of it. So it was either like too basic or too complex. I'm hoping to go somewhere in the middle. Okay, there is a theory, a scientific theory about how the universe began. You need to understand again, scientific theory is not it's not a guess, it's not an idea, it's not an opinion, it's not just, somebody's notion about something. It means that it explains a variety of phenomena and has been confirmed by observation, including things that it predicted and that were discovered later. Well, this theory became known as the Big Bang. Now, there were problems with the original Big Bang theory. What those problems were is not really important. It's not relevant here now. But there were problems, things that it struggled to explain. Well, in 1979, an astrophysicist by the name of Alan Guth proposed the inflationary universe that would solve these problems. Now, to understand what that means, the original idea of the Big Bang is that originally the universe was very dense, very compact in the first instant, and it expanded out. The universe was very tiny, very small, and expanded out like that. Well, the idea of inflation is that instead of expanding like this, the universe expanded like that, very rapidly for a very short time, and then more slowly. This actually solved the basic problems with the original Big Bang Theory. Now, the thing is that the Big Bang Theory received one of its biggest confirmations in the early 1990s by COBE. The COBE satellite. It was Cosmic Background Explorer, and the image it produced was this one. And you've probably seen this image or something similar to it. The thing you understand is this is an image of space, not of Earth. It's of space. And the different colors there reflect small differences in the temperature, the energy of the cosmic microwave background. This energy that's coming to us from all directions. And there were minor differences, and this is what was predicted. This COBE map was actually followed by a finer, more detailed map called, it's called WMAP or WMAP. It stands for the Wilkerson Microwave Anisotropy. Why do I always say that wrong? Anisotropy probe. I always say that wrong. I don't know why I have trouble with that word. In any event, by the WMAP satellite, and it gave us this more detailed image. The thing is, though, there's the problem. This image comes from the residual radiation from about 380,000 years after the Big Bang. We cannot see further back in time. This is not a technical limitation on us. It's not a technical constraint. This is a physical constraint. Cannot see further back than this. So when they say that scientists have seen to the beginning of time, it's not technically true. But the thing is, what we can do is we can look at what our theory about the Big Bang predicts and look for the evidence of that in this image. That's what they did. And this is what they found. It doesn't look like much, does it? No, it doesn't. But those lines indicate changes in light. See, one of the common predictions of Einstein's general theory of relativity, gravity bends light. This has been proved multiple times. So the Big Bang should have produced gravitational waves that would polarize light. By looking at the incredibly fine details that we had, they discovered, and that's what those lines represent, the polarization of light. So this actually is what they found. They found ripples in space-time. Ripples in space-time dating from roughly a trillionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a second after the Big Bang. A smoking gun for inflation, and proved that the forces of physics were previously joined. It's another confirmation. It confirms three different scientific theories. Ripples in space-time that represent the first real data we have about the first trillionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of the life of the universe. And if you don't think that's cool, there is no hope for you. Quick ending to this. It's been proposed to me that I do a quarterly special on And Another Thing. I'm going to mention this a few times. If I hear from a couple of people who say they'd like to see that happen, a quarterly hour-long special of cool science stuff, it'll happen. If I don't, it won't. It's that simple. So if you'd like it, let me know. For the moment, you have the best week you possibly can. Peace.